You're tuned into the podcast Sentimental Journey, where discussions happen on the music of the World War II era. My name is Hollis Zimmerman, and I will be exploring this important time in music history. Welcome to Sentimental Journey. Today we're going to examine the movies and the musicals that were popular during World War II. During the World War II era, not only did the music impact the soldiers and the civilians, they depicted the war efforts, the life that was going on during the era, and there were many movies and musicals that were released during that time period. Yankee Doodle Dandy is a popular movie and well known during World War II era, and was first performed at New York's Hollywood Theater on May 29, 1942. Tickets were only available for those who bought war bonds. It was later released on June 6, 1942 to the whole United States. It's a musical film about George M. Cohan, who wrote and produced more than 50 shows and published more than 300 songs with patriotic themes that were relatable to the soldiers during World War II, including the standards Over There, Give My Regards to Broadway, The Yankee Doodle Boy, and You're a Grand Old Flag. The Yankee Doodle Dandy stars many well-known entertainers of the 1940s, including James Cagney, who plays George M. Cohan, Joan Leslie, Walter Houston, and Richard Wharf. The movie is depicted when Cohan comes out of retirement to star as President Roosevelt in the Rodgers and Hart musical I'd Rather Be Right. On the first night, he's summoned to meet the president at the White House, who presents him with a Congressional Gold Medal. Cohan is overcome and chats with Roosevelt, recalling his early days on the stage. The film flashes to his supposed birth on July 4th. Whilst his father is performing on the vaudeville stage, Cohan and his sister joins the family act soon, so they learn to dance, and soon the four Cohens are performing successfully. But George gets too cocky, and he grows up and is blacklisted by theatrical producers for being troublesome. He leaves the act and hawks his songs unsuccessfully around to producers. In partnership with Sam Harris, another struggling writer, he finally interests a producer and they are on the road to success. As he leaves the White House after receiving the Congressional Gold Medal from the president, he descends a set of stairs while performing a tap dance. Outside, he joins a military parade where the soldiers are singing Over There, and at first he's not singing, not knowing that Cohan is the song's composer, and one of them asks if he knows the words. Cohan's response is a smile before joining in to sing along too. Yankee Doodle Dandy won several Academy Awards for Best Actor in Leading Role for James Cagney, the Best Music, the Scoring of Musical Picture, and the Best Sound Film Recording. It was nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Best Director, Best Film Editing, and Best Picture, and Best Writing Original Story. Well, next I'm going to talk about another popular wartime movie called Private Buckaroo that depicts the wartime when it was released on June 12, 1942. It stars many famous entertainers and also did some live entertaining during World War II, including artists like the Andrews Sisters, Dick Foran, Harry James, Shemp Howard, Joey Lewis, and Jennifer Holt. The film tells the story of Army recruits following basic training, with the Andrews Sisters attending U.S.O. dances. The movie is about entertainer Lon Parenti, who is keen to enlist in the U.S. Army, but is prevented from joining the Army due to having one flat foot. After having his flat fixed, he is accepted for enlistment. Soon after the basic training begins, Private Prentice informs his commanding officer that he finds most military training useless and unnecessary and beneath him. His commander orders all the men that Private Prentice is exempt from doing things he doesn't want to do, which turns the entire camp against him. Well, next I'm going to talk about the USO camps. The USO was created in 1941. The United Service Organizations, or USO, was tasked by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt keeping the morale high for troops serving in the World War II. The USO provided both recreational aid to troops overseas and on the home front. The Uso Camp Shows, a division of the USO, was formed in just 6 months after the creation of the USO. Hollywood actors and entertainers agreed to waive the pay to perform for troops. This request brought 6 civilian organizations together: the Salvation Army, the YMCA, the Young Women's Christian Association, the National Catholic Community Service, the National Travelers Aid Association, and the National Jewish Welfare Board. They brought together under one umbrella to support the U.S. troops. Roosevelt said he wanted these private organizations to handle the on-leave recreation of men in the armed forces. By 1942, the USO Camp Shows was the largest booking agency in the world and carried out over 270,000 performances between 1941 and 1945, featuring entertainers such as Bob Hope, Judy Garland, Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, John Wayne, and Lucille Ball. Acts range from singing, dancing, comedy to wrestling matches, providing portraits for soldiers. Around 7,000 performers traveled overseas to entertain the troops during World War II. Since 1941, it has worked in partnership with the Department of War and later with the Department of Defense, relying heavily on private contributions and funds, goods, and services from various corporate and international and individual donors. The USO sought to be the GI's home away from home and began a tradition of entertaining the troops and providing social facilities. Involvement in the USO was one of the many ways in which the nation had come together to support the war effort, with nearly 1.5 million people having volunteered their services in some way. The USO is also known for its live performances called camp shows, which through the entertainment industry helps boost the morale of servicemen and women. From the start, Hollywood was eager to show its patriotism, and many celebrities joined the ranks of the USO entertainers. They went as volunteers to entertain, and celebrities continued to provide volunteer entertainment in military bases in the U.S. and overseas, sometimes placing their own lives in danger by traveling or performing under hazardous conditions. The USO camp shows were designed to remind soldiers of home. The USO centers were established quickly in churches, barns, railroad cars, museums, castles, beach clubs, and log cabins. And most centers offered recreational activities such as holding dances and showing movies. And there were well-known free coffee and donuts. Some USO centers provided a haven for spending a quiet moment alone or writing a letter home, while others offered spiritual guidance and made child care available for military wives. Known for its performances called live camp shows, which through the entertainment industry helped boost the morale of its servicemen and women. USO camp shows began in October 1941, and by that fall and winter, 186 military theaters enlisted in the United States. Overseas shows began in November 1941 with a tour of the Caribbean. Within 5 months, 36 overseas units had been sent to the Americas, the United Kingdom, and Australia. And during 1942, 1,000 performed as part of 70 units. Average performers were paid $100 a week, and top stars paid $10 a day because their wealth let them contribute more of their talents. Following the invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, Edward G. Robinson was the first movie star to travel to Normandy to entertain the troops. He had already been active back home with selling war bonds and donated $100,000 to the USO. Fundraising was also aided by non-USO entertainment groups soldier shows, which troops often experienced actors and musicians organized and held their own shows were common. The Army formed a special services unit that organized such shows and supervised the USO, and the experience from the soldier shows led to Irving Berlin's Broadway show, This is the Army. In October of 1941, the USO worked with entertainment executives to send its first overseas tour featuring comedians Laurel and Harley, Chico Marx, and Broadway tap dancer Mitzi Mayfair to the Caribbean to entertain the troops. When the U.S. officially entered the war in December 1941, the USO Camp Show operations drastically increased, particularly in the Foxhole Circuit. Throughout the war, troops in the Foxhole Circuit would travel to entertain GIs in Europe, Russia, Central Africa, Alaska, the South Pacific, and the Middle East, among many other locations. As more U.S. service members poured into England and other parts of Europe during Pearl Harbor attacks in December 1941, stateside entertainers quickly followed in their footsteps. The first USO performers arrived in the UK in 1942. Big names like Bob Hope, the Andrews Sisters, Dinah Shore, among many others, eagerly and volunteered their time and talents to travel to troops overseas throughout the war. In May 1944, 243 entertainers split into 23 units and were traveling and performing throughout the UK. 6 days after D-Day, by June 10th, the USO Camp Shows Incorporated was reportedly mobilizing its efforts to head into Europe. By VE Day, the USO was putting on over 700 shows per day all around the world, and by the end of the war, had sent over 7,300 entertainers overseas to perform for the troops. Together, they had put on an estimated 420,000 performances to over 130 million service member attendees. During World War II, over 400,000 performances were put on by the USO and featured entertainers such as the Andrews Sisters, Fred Astaire, Lucille Ball, Count Basie, Ingrid Bergman, Humphrey Bogart, Bing Crosby, Marlene Dietrich, Bob Hope, Judy Garland, the Marx Brothers, Glenn Miller, Ginger Rogers, Dinah Shore, Frank Sinatra, and many, many more. There were 4 main entertainment circuits that were connected and operated during the USO Camp Shows, which were the Victory Union, the Blue Circuit, the Hospital Circuit, and the Foxhole Circuit. The first was the Victory Circuit, which brought the big shows with the famous celebrities or complete Broadway musicals with as many as 50 performers each on stateside tours to the largest bases. The Victory Circuit entertained another 352,000 patients, and by the end of the war, the USO performers had entertained 3.3 million patients in 192 hospitals. From 1941 to 1947, USO Camp Shows presented an amazing 428,521 performances. In 1945, curtains were rising 700 times a day, and by all, more than 7,000 entertainers traveled overseas to entertain the troops. Second was the Blue Circuit, which was the vaudeville circuit with comedians and 3 or 4 acts on stateside tours of smaller venues. The Foxhole Circuit, the most renowned of all the USO-sponsored entertainment efforts, brought performers overseas and in combat areas around the world. Tours were in all war theaters of operations. The Foxhole Circuit entertainers performed to all sizes of audiences, from as many as 15,000 GIs in a large stadium or airfield to as few as 15 to 20 soldiers standing around a jeep in a remote battlefield crossroads. The Foxhole Circuit brought performers overseas. Entertainers of the Foxhole Circuit would perform on the front lines and live similarly to the troops, even wearing uniforms when not performing. The Hospital Circuit began in 1944 that brought special entertainment units to military personnel and hospitals. Celebrities, singers, artists, and dancers performed in hospital wards, both stateside and overseas. The camp show's portraits were some of the most common entertainment provided on the hospital circuit. After the portrait was completed, the subject's name, the artist's name, and the USO camp shows was noted at every corner of the portrait drawn, and then it was sent to the home to family members. In 1944 alone, the entertainers on the hospital circuit gave 5,444 performances for 850,537 patients in 79 hospitals. During World War II, the Broadway musicals stayed clear of wartime themes, but Hollywood musicals embraced the World War II era. However, one musical I'm going to focus on is called Winged Victory, which premiered on November 20th, 1943, and written by Moss Hart. This musical was created and produced by the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II as a morale booster and as a fundraiser for the Army Emergency Relief Fund. Moss Hart adapted the play to a 1944 motion picture directed by George Cukor. The Winged Victory tells the story of a group of recruits struggling to make it through pilot training. The trainees are a cross-section of American young men. Their personal lives, their families, and their sweethearts make up a small part of the story, but most of the drama focuses on the training and camaraderie. Music plays a large part in the play. Among them are numbers like My Little Dream Book of Memories and the stirring anthem Winged Victory. Among recommendation of Lieutenant Colonel Dudley S. Dean, who had been approached with the idea of the talent agent Irving Lazar and Lieutenant Benjamin Landis, the Air Force's commanding general Henry H. Arnold commissioned famed playwright Hart to create a stage drama that would depict both the training and the work of airmen, and also the commitment and devotion to duty which carried out his work. Arnold gave Hart complete access to the Air Force's resources. Hart traveled the United States visiting Air Force bases and seeing firsthand how the training was carried out. Then he wrote an extremely patriotic and uplifting stage play based on his research. Hart partnered with Irving Lazar not only to produce the play, but to also gather actors for the huge nearly 300 cast members. Casting calls went out not only to well-known names, but to Army units around the country for Air Force's personnel with theatrical or performing background. All male personnel involved with the show were service members of the United States Army Air Forces and were billed with their actual ranks. Most of the relatively new roles for women of the play were portrayed by the wives of the actors. The play opened in Boston, Massachusetts in the fall of 1943 in a street theater on November 20th, 1943, and became a smash hit, playing to over 350,000 people in 226 performances. During the New York run, performers in the show also toured local military camps, providing entertainment to the troops. The successful run of Winged Victory on Broadway ended only in order to that entire cast to travel to Hollywood to appear in the film version. Following filming, the company embarked on a national tour of the play, performing over 445 times for over 800,000 people. At the tour's end in April 1945, the cast and crew were dispersed throughout the Army Air Forces, many of them transferring to the 1st Motion Picture Unit in California. They were there to make many training films. Due to both the enormous cast as well as staging demands as well to the extremely era-specific nature of the play, Winged Victory is one of the biggest hits in Broadway history to have never to have a second production anywhere. Another musical wartime film that was released during World War II in the 1940s is This Is the Army, that was based on the 1942 Broadway musical by Irving Berlin, who also composed the film's 19 songs, and this musical was released on August 14th, 1943, and first premiered at the Warner's Earl Theater. This musical was designed to boost the morale in the U.S. The movie features a large ensemble cast, including George Murphy, Ronald Reagan, Joan Leslie, Alan Hale Sr. and Rosemary DeCamp, while both the stage and the play film included soldiers of the United States Army who were actors and performers in civilian life. The movie features star appearances by Irving Berlin, Kate Smith, who sings her full-length rendition of Irving Berlin's God Bless America, and Frances Langford. The money that was raised for the musical, which was donated to the Army Emergency Relief. Many of the soldiers who participated in the show held reunions every 5 years after the end of World War II. The musical score was nominated for a scoring of a musical picture in the 16th Annual Academy Awards. These movies and musicals all had different stories and depicted and reflected the wartime themes, but my favorite one is Yankee Doodle Dandy, which was first recommended by my uncle for me to watch. The movie was released in 1943, has that wartime theme, and depicts the life and career of George M. Cohan, who wrote so many patriotic theme songs that were popular during that time, and the themes that were relatable to soldiers during World War II, including the standards of Over There, The Yankee Doodle Boy, and You're a Grand Old Flag. And I feel that James Cagney does a great job singing all the patriotic tunes and reflecting in the depicting of the career of George Cohan, and it has to be one of my many favorite movies of the 1940s. And I can tell that this movie was a favorite among soldiers in World War II with its patriotic setting, theme, and songs. There were so many male and female artists during World War II who were active during the U.S.O, entertaining the troops all around the world and keeping their spirits up. I would love to see if there's videos out there of the artists performing and all of the soldiers. It would be neat seeing some footage, both video and photos, of the different USO camp shows that were put on by the 4 different entertainment circuits, and seeing the troops that were present at different places while being entertained during World War II. You can find us on Facebook at Sentimental Journey and subscribe to our podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.